My wife died on a Tuesday. I thought I knew everything about her. The arguments we had. The way she took her coffee. The name of every person she loved. I was wrong about all of it. 3 weeks after we buried her, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. The woman on the other end said 4 words that stopped my heart completely. Daniel. We need to talk. She was my wife's therapist. And what she told me next, I've spent 2 years trying to decide if I deserve to hear it. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 44 years old, and for 11 years, I was married to the most careful woman I've ever known. Careful with her words. Careful with her feelings. Careful about what she let people see. I thought that was just Sarah. I thought I was the exception. The one person she let all the way in. I was wrong. Sarah died on October 14, 2021. Pulmonary embolism. A blood clot that formed quietly, moved quickly, and gave us no warning. She was 41 years old. She had just made coffee. She was standing in the kitchen wearing my old college sweatshirt, and then she wasn't standing anymore. The paramedics were there in 6 minutes. It didn't matter. The weeks after her death are still blurry to me. People came and went from our house. Casseroles appeared on the counter. My sister handled the service because I couldn't handle anything. I remember sitting at the kitchen table for hours, not crying, just still. Like a clock that had stopped but nobody had thought to tell. We didn't have children. It had been a conversation we'd revisited many times, always landing in the same soft, unresolved place. Someday, we always said. Someday never came. What I remember most clearly about those first weeks is the silence. Sarah was not a loud woman, but she filled a room in ways I can't fully explain. The way she hummed while she read. The way she left cabinet doors open. The way she'd reach over in the dark and just place her hand on my arm without saying a word. When she was gone, the house felt grammatically wrong. Like every sentence had lost its subject. I went back to work after 3 weeks. People didn't know what to say to me, so they said things like she's in a better place and at least it was quick. I smiled and nodded and wanted to disappear. At night I'd go through her things slowly. Not to sort or donate, I wasn't ready for that. Just to be near them. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. A half-finished novel with a receipt used as a bookmark. A grocery list on the back of an envelope in her handwriting. Oat milk. Lemons. That fancy mustard Daniel pretends not to like. I broke down completely over that mustard line. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 23 days after the funeral. I was sitting in my car in the work parking lot, not ready to go inside. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Is this Daniel Mercer? The voice was a woman's. Calm and measured. Professional but careful, the way someone sounds when they're about to say something difficult and they've rehearsed it. Yes, I said. My name is Dr. Carol Weiss. I was Sarah's therapist. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know this call may come as a surprise. It did. In 11 years of marriage, Sarah had never once mentioned a therapist. I sat with that for a moment. I wasn't aware Sarah was seeing anyone, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I know, Dr. Weiss said. And there was something in those 2 words. Not apology exactly. More like acknowledgement. Like she had known this would be my response. She came to me for the last 2 years, she continued. She asked me, in the event of her death, to contact you. She left that instruction very clearly. She said, and I want to read this exactly as she wrote it, if something happens to me, please call Daniel. He deserves to understand. Not to hurt him. But because he deserves the truth more than he deserves a comfortable lie. I didn't speak. The parking lot was very bright. Ordinary. A man walked past with a coffee cup. A car alarm beeped somewhere. Everything looked exactly like it always did. Daniel, Dr. Weiss said quietly. Are you available to meet this week? I said yes before I understood what I was agreeing to. I think some part of me already knew, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky has changed. Something in your chest recognizes it first. I drove home that night and sat in the same kitchen where I'd lost her. I looked at the space where she'd fallen. And for the first time since she died, I was afraid of what I was going to learn. Not about her death. About her life. Dr. Carol Weiss had an office on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old paper and central heating. The waiting room had 2 chairs, a small table with a plant on it, and a white noise machine outside the door that I would come to understand the purpose of very quickly. I arrived 12 minutes early. I sat and stared at the plant. Dr. Weiss was in her late 50s. Silver hair cut short. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She shook my hand with both of hers, not in an overcompensating way, just in the way of someone who understood that some moments require more than one hand. Her office was warm. Books everywhere. Two chairs facing each other at a slight angle, no desk between us. A deliberate choice, I realized. No barriers. She was going to need me open. Before I tell you anything, she said, settling into her chair, I want you to know that Sarah loved you. I need that to be the foundation of this conversation, not an afterthought. Whatever you hear today, that part was never in question. Not once in 2 years. I nodded. My hands were folded in my lap like I was in church. Okay, I said. She began at the beginning. Sarah had first come to her in October of 2019. Exactly 2 years before she died, though no one could have known that then. She came, Dr. Weiss explained, because she was struggling with something she described as a fracture between the life she was living and the life she had buried. I remember the exact phrase because Dr. Weiss read it from her notes. A fracture between the life she was living and the life she had buried. What does that mean? I asked. Dr. Weiss looked at me steadily. Before she met you, Daniel, before the marriage, before Chicago, Sarah had a daughter. The white noise machine hummed outside the door. Somewhere in the building, an elevator opened and closed. I heard everything with extraordinary clarity. She was 19, Dr. Weiss continued. A relationship that ended badly. She wasn't in a position, emotionally, financially, to raise a child on her own. She made an adoption plan. A closed adoption. The baby went to a family in Portland. She paused. Her name was Emma. Sarah named her before she signed the papers. She said she needed to give her something that was hers, even if it was only that. I thought about every conversation Sarah and I had ever had about children. The careful way she'd approach it. The way she'd go quiet at the edges of the topic, like someone navigating around a room in the dark, aware of exactly where the furniture was. Someday, she always said. Someday. And I had believed it was ambivalence. It was grief. She never told me, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was barely even a sentence. Just 3 words falling out of me. No, Dr. Weiss said. She didn't. And that was the central wound she was working through when she came to me. The guilt of keeping it from you. The fear of what it would change. It wouldn't have changed anything, I said immediately. Dr. Weiss looked at me with the particular patience of someone who has learned that what people say and what people feel are not always the same country. She was afraid it would change how you saw her, she said quietly. She was afraid you'd see the 19-year-old girl who gave away her baby, and not the woman she'd worked so hard to become. I pressed my hands flat on my knees to keep them from shaking. Was she planning to tell me? Yes. Dr. Weiss said it without hesitation. That's why she came to me. She wasn't here to keep the secret. She was here to find the courage to end it. We had been building toward that conversation for months. She paused. She was going to tell you in December. She had a plan. She even had the words. December 2021. 2 months after she died. I stood up. Not because I was leaving, I don't think I could have left. I just needed to be vertical for a moment. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. People moving. Traffic. Ordinary Thursday. There's more, Dr. Weiss said behind me. Her voice was careful. Braced. I turned around. Emma is 22 now, she said. She found Sarah 14 months before Sarah died. Through one of the DNA registries. Sarah knew she existed, knew she was healthy, knew she was loved. They had exchanged 3 letters. The room tilted slightly. Sarah was trying to decide whether to tell you about Emma at the same time she told you about the adoption. It was a great deal to carry. She didn't want to overwhelm you. She didn't want it to feel like ambush. So she carried it alone, I said. She carried it alone, Dr. Weiss agreed. I sat back down. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the parking lot 3 days ago. Did she die carrying this? Was the stress of it? No, Dr. Weiss said firmly. A pulmonary embolism is not caused by emotional stress. There is nothing Sarah did or didn't do that caused her death. I want you to hear that clearly. I nodded. But the thought had already moved in, the way those thoughts do. Irrational and immovable. She had a daughter, I said softly. Mostly to myself. She had a daughter, Dr. Weiss confirmed. Then she said the thing that cracked the floor open beneath me completely. And Emma knows about you, Daniel. Sarah told her about you in the letters. Emma reached out to me after Sarah's obituary was published. She reached into the folder on the small table beside her chair. She wrote you a letter. I didn't open the letter that day. I took it from Dr. Weiss with both hands, the way you'd accept something fragile or sacred, and I folded it carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of my jacket. Against my chest. I thanked her. I don't remember what words I used. I rode the elevator down alone and walked out into the cold November air and sat on a bench outside the building for 40 minutes without moving. A woman asked me if I was all right. I told her I was fine. That night I placed the letter on the kitchen table. I made coffee I didn't drink. I washed dishes that were already clean. I reorganized nothing in the pantry for 20 minutes. Then I sat down across from the envelope like it was a person. Emma's handwriting was on the front. My name. Daniel Mercer. The letters were round and careful, the handwriting of someone who had rewritten this envelope more than once. I thought about a 22-year-old woman sitting somewhere, Portland, Dr. Weiss had said, writing my name on an envelope. Wondering who I was. Wondering if I'd write back. Wondering, maybe, if I'd be angry. I didn't open it that night either. I put it on Sarah's nightstand, next to her reading glasses and her unfinished novel. It felt right. It felt like it belonged to her first. I went back to Dr. Weiss the following week. And the week after that. What had started as a single conversation about Sarah had become, without my fully choosing it, my own therapy. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm telling you because it matters to what happened next. Because it was Dr. Weiss who asked me, in our third session, a question I was completely unprepared for. We had been talking about Sarah's fear. Her inability to tell me the truth despite wanting to. I had said, and I remember this clearly because I'd said it with such certainty, I don't understand why she was so afraid. I would never have judged her. Dr. Weiss let that sit for a moment. Then she said, Daniel, can I ask you something? And I'd like you to really think before you answer. Of course, I said. Has anyone in your life ever told you something vulnerable, something genuinely difficult about themselves, and felt worse for having told you? I opened my mouth. And then I closed it. The silence that followed was the most honest thing I'd produced in weeks. Because something was surfacing. Something I did not want to look at. Dr. Weiss didn't push. She just waited with the particular patience of someone who has learned that the most important things people say, they say into silence. I thought about my brother Marcus. How he'd told me, years ago, that he was struggling with drinking. How I had listened and then, I could see it now, had shifted almost immediately into advice mode. Into fix-it mode. How I'd sent him articles. Called him to check on his progress. How he'd eventually stopped bringing it up. I thought he'd gotten better. I realized, sitting in that chair, that he'd just gotten quieter. I thought about Sarah's mother, Patricia, who had once started to tell me something at Thanksgiving, something about her own marriage, her own unhappiness, and how I had changed the subject. Not cruelly. Just, efficiently. The way you reroute a conversation when it's heading somewhere uncomfortable. I had told myself I was protecting her. I think, I said slowly, that I may have made it difficult. To tell me things. Dr. Weiss nodded. Not triumphantly. Not with pity. Just acknowledgement. Sarah described you as the safest person she'd ever known, she said. And also, sometimes, the most difficult to be fully honest with. She said, and again I'm reading from my notes, Daniel makes you want to be your best self around him. Which sounds like a gift. But sometimes it makes you terrified of showing him the rest. I sat with that for a long time. The most difficult to be fully honest with. I had spent weeks being quietly furious at Sarah for keeping secrets. And I had framed it, even in my own mind, as something she had done to me. I had not once asked myself what part one had played in building the walls she hid behind. I went home and I opened the letter. Emma wrote the way her handwriting suggested she would. Carefully. Thoughtfully. She didn't ask for anything. She made that clear in the second sentence, as if she'd anticipated the fear and wanted to remove it immediately. I'm not looking to disrupt anything. I just wanted you to know that she mattered to me, even before I knew her. And from what she wrote about you, I thought you might need to know that she wasn't alone with this. She was working toward something. She was trying. She had included one of Sarah's letters. The second one, she explained. She felt it was the one I should read. Sarah's handwriting was something I had been avoiding. On grocery lists, on birthday cards, anywhere it appeared in the house I'd been stepping around it like broken glass. But I read the letter. Sarah wrote about Portland. About the autumn she was 19 and terrified and completely alone. She wrote about the family she'd chosen for Emma, a teacher and an architect, she said, people who had a dog and a garden and wanted a child more than anything in the world. She wrote, I have never stopped wondering about you. I have also never stopped believing I made the right choice, which is a complicated thing to carry, loving someone and knowing you gave them away and believing it was still the right thing. Most days I manage it. Some days I don't. And then, near the end of the letter, one paragraph that stopped my breath. I've been trying to tell my husband. He's a good man, genuinely good, the kind that makes you want to be better. But I've realized lately that I've been using his goodness as an excuse. Telling myself he wouldn't understand. When really, I think I'm afraid he'd understand too well. That he'd forgive me so completely it would make the years of silence unforgivable by comparison. I read that paragraph 4 times. Then I set the letter down on the kitchen table. And for the first time since October 14th, I cried. Not the stunned, shallow crying of the early days. Something deeper. The kind that comes from the chest, from somewhere that's been sealed. I cried for Sarah. I cried for Emma. I cried for the version of myself my wife had loved so much she was afraid to disappoint. Part 4, What She Left Me. I wrote back to Emma 3 weeks later. I drafted the letter 11 times. The first 7 were too formal. The 8th was too emotional, 4 pages of grief that would have frightened a stranger. The 9th was too short, which felt dismissive. The 10th was almost right. The 11th, I sent. I told her that Sarah had loved her. That I knew this not from the letters alone but from every quiet, unresolved moment across 11 years of marriage that I now understood differently. Every someday. Every careful silence around the edges of the conversation about children. Every time Sarah had looked at a young mother in a grocery store with an expression I'd filed away as wistfulness and now recognized as something far more specific. I told Emma that I was not her father and made no claim to be. But that she had been loved by someone I loved completely. And that made her matter to me. I told her I hoped Portland was good to her. I signed it, Daniel. She wrote back in 8 days. Short. Warm. She thanked me. She said Sarah had described my laugh and that she hoped to hear it someday, in some low-stakes situation with no pressure attached. I laughed when I read that. Then I cried again, but differently. The way you cry when something has moved from wound to scar. Still tender. But closed. I want to tell you about the final thing. The piece I haven't mentioned yet. Because there was one more revelation. And it came not from Dr. Weiss, not from Emma, but from a box I found in the back of Sarah's closet on a Sunday afternoon in February, 4 months after she died. I had finally begun the process of going through her things. Slowly. One shelf at a time. The box was a plain shoebox. Taped shut. My name written on the top in her handwriting. Daniel. Not a label. Not a note. Just my name. Like she was handing it to me directly. Inside was a letter. Long handwritten. Dated September 3, 2021. 6 weeks before she died. She had not known she was going to die. I want to be clear about that. This was not a goodbye letter. It was something else entirely. It was the letter she had been building toward in therapy for 2 years. The one she was going to give me in December. She'd written it early, Dr. Weiss later told me, because she'd had a burst of courage one Sunday morning and hadn't wanted to lose it. She had written it, sealed it, and put it away. Planning to retrieve it when the moment was right. The moment never came. But the letter did. I'm not going to read you all of it. Some of it belongs only to me. But I'll tell you what she said at the beginning, because it reframed everything that followed. She wrote, Daniel, if you're reading this, either I finally found the courage to hand it to you, or I ran out of time. Either way, I need you to know that this letter is not about what I kept from you. It's about why. And I think the why matters more than you might expect, not to excuse me, but to show you something about both of us that I think we need to look at together. Together. She had written that word not knowing that together was already over. She wrote about Emma. About Portland. About being 19 and alone and making the hardest decision of her life with no one sitting beside her. She wrote about meeting me at 30 and falling in love with a man who was capable and steady and good in ways she hadn't known to hope for. She wrote about how that goodness had been the greatest gift of her adult life. And then she wrote the part one have returned to more than any other. I have been afraid, for most of our marriage, of the moment you would see me fully. Not the version of me that makes dinner and remembers your mother's birthday and holds things together, but the version that made a terrible, necessary, loving choice at 19 and carried it silently for decades. I have been afraid that your love was conditional on a version of me that doesn't entirely exist. I don't believe that anymore. That's why I'm writing this. I think you are capable of loving the whole of me. I think I've just never let you try. I'm sorry I made that decision for you. I'm sorry I decided what you could handle without asking. You deserve the chance to show me who you actually were. I took that from you because I was frightened. And that wasn't fair. So here it is. Here I am. All of me. 19 and terrified and also 41 and sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning drinking coffee and more in love with you than I have words for. Please don't be angry at yourself for not knowing. You couldn't have known what I didn't show you. But maybe, going forward, we could both try to make it a little easier to be known. I sat on the closet floor for a long time. The house was very quiet. Outside, February was doing what February does, gray and slow and indifferent. And I held my wife's letter and understood, fully and finally, that she had not hidden herself from me because she didn't trust me. She had hidden herself from me because she loved me. Because losing my good opinion was the thing she feared most in the world. And I understood something else. That love, the kind that makes you want to be your best self, can be a gift. But it can also, without meaning to, become a cage. I'm still in therapy with Dr. Weiss. Not every week anymore. But enough. We talk sometimes about what it means to be easy to love versus easy to be honest with. About how those two things can live in the same person and still be in conflict. About how presence isn't the same as openness. About how even the safest rooms can have corners people are afraid to stand in. I have a photograph of Sarah on my desk now. Not the professional one from our 10th anniversary that everyone always compliments. A candid one. She's sitting on the back porch in old jeans, reading glasses on, squinting at something in a book. Completely unguarded. Completely herself. I found it on her phone when I was finally ready to go through it. I think it's the truest picture anyone ever took of her. I think she would have hated it. I think that's why I love it. Emma and I are in contact. Nothing heavy. An email every few weeks. She sent me a photo of herself at Christmas, standing in front of a tree, laughing at something off camera. She has Sarah's eyes. Not exactly. But the shape of the feeling in them. The way they hold more than they give away. I told her that. She said she'd been told that before and never knew what it meant until now. I don't have a clean ending for this story. I don't think real ones come with those. What I have is this: a woman I loved completely had an entire chapter of herself she was too afraid to show me. And she spent 2 years building the courage to change that. She ran out of time. But she left me the letter. And the letter left me with a question I now carry into every relationship I have, with friends, with my brother Marcus, with Emma, with myself. Am I someone people can afford to be honest with? Not just safe. Not just kind. But genuinely, practically, easy to tell the hard thing to. I'm working on it. Sarah would have liked that, I think. She always said I was a slow learner who got there eventually. If someone you loved had kept a secret not to hurt you, but to protect what you had, would you want to know the truth? Or would you rather carry the comfort of the story you believed? Think carefully before you answer. If this story stayed with you, the next one will too. Sometimes the people we think we know the best are the ones we've never truly let us see them. Stay close. The next story begins where this one ends.